Chapter 6. Betrayal. The brothers returned home, each step heavier than the last. They knew what they had done was wrong, but the resentment that had festered for so long had clouded their judgment. When they reached the front porch, Orrin was waiting for them, his face creased with worry. "Where's Kai?" he asked, scanning the group. Lance pulled out his phone and showed Orrin the picture of the stained, torn jacket lying in the dirt. "We found this on the way back. He must have gotten into trouble and wandered off. We couldn't find him, Dad. I'm sorry." Orrin took the phone with trembling hands, staring at the image as his heart shattered. No, my son, my Kai." His voice broke, and he clutched the phone to his chest, tears streaming down his weathered face. The brothers looked away, guilt gnawing at them, but none of them spoke the truth. They let their father believe the lie, hoping that time would bury their shame. But Kai, alone in the darkness, knew that the betrayal had already marked him, carving a wound deep into his heart that would not easily heal. Chapter 7. The Aftermath. Orrin's heart ached with a sorrow that words couldn't reach. He clutched the stained and torn jacket, a painful reminder of his beloved Kai. The vibrant colors that once symbolized his son's uniqueness now seemed to mock him, representing a life that had slipped away far too soon. For days, Orrin wandered the house in a daze, his face etched with grief. His other sons tried to console him, but guilt weighed heavily on their hearts, a secret they could neither confess nor shake. One night, as the family sat in strained silence around the dinner table, Orrin finally spoke, his voice rough with pain. "I always thought Kai was meant for something special," he whispered, staring at the empty chair where his son used to sit. His dreams, his spirit, they were different. He wasn't like anyone else. The brothers exchanged uneasy glances, each feeling the weight of Orrin's words. "Dad," Malik said, his voice barely a whisper. Maybe he's still out there somewhere. Maybe he found his way back to the city." Orrin shook his head, his expression hollow. If he were out there, he would have come home. Kai wouldn't have just left without a word. He looked down at the jacket, his hands trembling. "I failed him. I should have protected him." Tay shifted in his seat, unable to meet his father's eyes. We did what we could, Dad. We looked for him. But maybe Kai, maybe he wasn't meant to stay here with us." Orrin's face crumpled, and he buried his face in his hands. "I'll never forgive myself for losing him. My son, my beautiful son." As Orrin's quiet sobs filled the room, the brothers sat in silence, the guilt and shame tightening around their hearts. They had taken something precious from their father and from themselves, and now they were left with the heavy burden of knowing they could never undo what they'd done. Meanwhile, miles away, Kai remained alone, left to find his way in a world that felt foreign and unforgiving. Chapter 8. Stranded. As the days bled into weeks, Kai wandered the outskirts of Viridian, cold, hungry, and alone. His clothes were ragged, and his spirit was crushed, weighed down by the betrayal that echoed in his mind. He'd always trusted his family, his brothers, but now he was left with nothing. No home, no sense of belonging. One afternoon, weak from hunger and exhaustion, Kai stumbled into a small, rundown cafe on the edge of the city. The warm aroma of coffee and freshly baked bread filled the air, and his stomach twisted with longing. An older man behind the counter looked up as Kai entered, his eyes narrowing with curiosity. "You look like you've been through a rough time, son," he said, his voice gruff but kind. "Need something to eat?" Kai hesitated, glancing around. I I don't have any money, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. The man chuckled, waving him over. Don't worry about that. I'm Ezra. You can pay me back some other time. Kai shuffled forward, gratefully accepting the plate of food Ezra placed in front of him. As he ate, he felt a warmth settle over him, something he hadn't felt in days. Ezra watched him, a curious glint in his eyes. So, what brings you here? Looking like you've been through a storm? Ezra asked, his tone gentle. Kai swallowed, wiping his mouth. I don't really have anywhere to go, he murmured, choosing his words carefully. My family, things didn't work out. Ezra nodded, his gaze softening. Well, I can't say I know the whole story, but you're welcome to stick around here. Could use an extra set of hands. Kai looked up, surprised by the offer. You mean you'd give me a job? Sure, Ezra replied with a shrug. Work hard, be honest, and you got a place here. Sound fair? A small smile tugged at Kai's lips, and he nodded, feeling a spark of hope reignite in his chest. For the first time since his brother's betrayal, he felt a glimmer of purpose, a path that might lead him somewhere safe. He had no idea where this road would take him, but for now, it was enough to know he had a place to begin again. Chapter 9. Humility and Hard Work. Working at the cafe was no easy task. Kai spent long hours scrubbing floors, washing dishes, and waiting tables. At first, the work was exhausting, and his hands ached from the unfamiliar labor. But each night, as he lay on the small cot Ezra had set up for him in the back room, he felt a sense of satisfaction he hadn't known before. Ezra became a guiding presence, teaching him not just the skills he needed, but the values that would shape him. One evening, after a long day, Ezra sat across from Kai, handing him a cup of tea. You know, hard work builds character, Ezra said, his eyes twinkling with wisdom. You might feel tired now, but one day you'll look back and see just how far you've come. Kai nodded, sipping his tea thoughtfully. I never thought I'd end up here. My life, it was so different before. Ezra looked at him, waiting patiently. I was supposed to be someone important, Kai admitted, his voice barely a whisper. At least that's what I thought. But now, I don't know who I am anymore. Ezra placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Sometimes, life takes us down paths we don't expect. But remember, it's not where you start, son. It's where you end up that matters. Kai looked down, his heart swelling with gratitude. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he was beginning to understand that the journey was just as important as the destination. Each day he worked harder, finding purpose in the small tasks and pride in his efforts. Slowly, the memories of his brother's betrayal faded, replaced by a growing strength he hadn't known he possessed. Chapter 10. Rise of Talent. As the months passed, Kai's natural talents began to shine through. He had an eye for detail, a knack for organization, and a quiet charisma that drew people in. The cafe, once a hidden gem, started attracting more customers, and Ezra couldn't have been prouder. One evening, after a particularly busy day, Ezra pulled Kai aside, his eyes twinkling with pride. You've done wonders here, Kai. I don't think I could have managed all this without you. Kai smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. Thank you, Ezra. I wanted to do my best. Ezra clapped him on the shoulder. You've done more than that. You've made this place better, brought people together. That's something special. As Kai looked around the bustling cafe, he felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't known before. The dreams he'd once held, the visions of greatness, felt distant, almost like a faded memory. But here, in this small cafe, he'd found something real, something he could call his own. Chapter 11, Recognition. Word of Kai's dedication and the cafe's newfound popularity began to spread through Viridian. Customers praised his service, admired his work ethic, and soon he became a well-known figure in the neighborhood. One day, a woman named Amari walked in, her eyes bright with curiosity. She introduced herself as a youth coordinator for a city leadership program, and her voice was warm as she spoke to Kai. "I've heard a lot about you, Kai," she said with a smile. "You've turned this place around, made a real impact. We're looking for young leaders like you, people with vision and heart." Kai's eyes widened, a surge of hope sparking within him. You think I'd be a good fit?" Amari nodded. "I think you'd be perfect. You've got something special, Kai, and I'd love to see where that could take you." As she handed him an application, Kai felt a sense of purpose rekindling within him. The journey had been long, and the scars of betrayal still lingered, but for the first time, he saw a path forward, a chance to make something of himself, to turn his pain into power. With renewed determination, Kai accepted the opportunity, feeling as if fate had given him a second chance. Chapter 12, New Opportunity. Entering the leadership program was like stepping into a new world. Kai found himself surrounded by young, ambitious people, each with dreams and goals that mirrored his own. He threw himself into the work, determined to prove his worth. As the weeks went on, Kai's natural abilities shone through. He took on projects with enthusiasm, leading his peers with quiet strength. Slowly, he began to build a reputation, his name becoming known not just within the cafe but across the city. Ezra watched him with pride, always offering a steady hand and wise advice. "Remember, Kai," he said one evening, "leadership isn't just about being in charge. It's about serving others, lifting them up. You have the heart for that." Kai nodded, feeling the truth of Ezra's words resonate within him. The dreams he once held were taking shape, but in a way he'd never imagined. No longer did he long for recognition for its own sake. Now he wanted to serve, to make a difference for the people who had come to rely on him. This, he realized, was true leadership, lifting others, not just himself. Under Amari's guidance, Kai led community projects, organized events, and brought people together. His quiet charisma inspired others, and people began to speak of him with admiration, calling him a leader with a heart of gold. But though his success filled him with pride, there was a lingering ache in his chest, a longing for the family he'd lost. Chapter 13, Growth and Learning. As Kai's responsibilities grew, he discovered a depth of strength and resilience he'd never known. He spent hours managing projects, speaking at events, and coordinating resources. The challenges were many, but each one taught him something new. One day, Amari pulled him aside, her gaze filled with pride. "Kai, you've come so far," she said, her voice warm. "When I first met you, I saw potential, but what you've achieved, it's beyond anything I could have imagined." Kai smiled, grateful for her support. "I wouldn't have come this far without people like you and Ezra," he replied. I hope my family could see me now. Maybe they'd finally understand." Amari's expression softened. Family can be complicated. Sometimes the people closest to us can't see our worth until we've shown it to the world. Maybe one day they'll see all you've become. Kai looked down, her words both comforting and painful. He missed his father, missed the sense of belonging he once felt. But he knew he couldn't turn back now. He had to keep moving forward, not just for himself, but for the community that had come to depend on him. Chapter 14, The Encounter. Kai's life in Viridian had blossomed into something he never could have foreseen. One evening during a citywide event, Kai found himself giving a speech about leadership and resilience. He spoke with passion, his words resonating with the audience. As he finished, the applause was overwhelming, and he felt a surge of pride. But as he stepped down from the stage, he froze. Among the crowd, he saw two familiar faces, Lance and Tay, his brothers, staring at him in shock. They hadn't recognized him at first, but now, seeing him up close, their expressions shifted from surprise to guilt. Kai's heart raced as memories of their betrayal surged back, but he forced himself to remain calm. He approached them, his face carefully neutral. "Kai, is it really you?" Lance asked, his voice barely audible. Kai nodded, his gaze steady. "Yes, it's been a long time." Tay glanced away, shame flickering across his face. We thought you were gone, that you'd never come back." "I had to find my own path," Kai replied, his tone cold, "a path that didn't include betrayal." Lance swallowed, unable to meet Kai's eyes. "We were wrong. We see that now. Kai, we're sorry. We didn't know what we were doing back then." Kai's expression softened, though the pain of their actions lingered. "You don't get to just apologize and expect everything to be fine. You took everything from me. I had to start over with nothing." The weight of his words hung in the air, and for a moment, his brothers were silent, each realizing the depth of what they'd done. Chapter 15, The Test of Leadership. The encounter with his brothers weighed on Kai, but he pushed forward, determined to continue his work. Amari soon approached him with a new challenge, a project that would test his skills and push him to his limits. He was to lead a citywide relief effort, coordinating resources to support those in need during a time of crisis. Kai threw himself into the work, his resolve strengthening with each day. He worked tirelessly, organizing teams, securing donations, and leading volunteers. His dedication inspired everyone around him, and soon people began to see him as not just a leader, but a beacon of hope. As the project unfolded, Kai's brothers returned to him, this time seeking help, their previous pride and resentment stripped away. Their faces were filled with humility and regret. "Kai, we need your help," Tay said, his voice trembling. "The relief project. We don't have the resources to support our area. Please, we don't know who else to turn to." Kai looked at them, his heart torn. He saw the desperation in their eyes, the weight of guilt they carried. Part of him wanted to turn them away, to let them feel the pain they had caused him. But as he looked into their faces, he remembered Ezra's words about leadership, about serving others, even when it was difficult. "Tell me what you need," Kai said quietly, his voice steady. "I'll do what I can." The brothers exchanged glances, relief and gratitude flooding their expressions. In that moment, they realized that the Kai they had once betrayed was no longer the same young boy. He was stronger, wiser, and filled with a compassion they could barely understand. Chapter 16, A Crisis. The crisis grew worse, stretching the city's resources to their limits. Kai worked day and night, leading his team with unyielding determination. His brothers joined him, working beside him to distribute supplies, set up shelters, and support those in need. As they worked together, the walls between them began to crumble. The brothers saw the strength and resilience that Kai had gained through his journey, and their respect for him grew. Slowly, they began to understand the depth of their betrayal and the price Kai had paid. One evening, as they packed supplies, Lance approached Kai, his face filled with remorse. "Kai, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," Lance said quietly, "but I want you to know I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything." Kai paused, his hands resting on a crate. He looked at Lance, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. "I know you're sorry," Kai replied, his voice calm, "but forgiveness isn't something that comes easily. I've spent years trying to heal from what you did. It's not something I can just forget." Lance nodded, his shoulders slumping. "I understand. I wish I could go back and undo it all." Kai's gaze softened. "We can't change the past, but maybe we can try to build something better." For the first time, Lance felt a glimmer of hope, and he nodded, grateful for the chance to start over. Chapter 17, Revelation. As the crisis eased, Kai's leadership became a beacon of hope for the entire city. People spoke of him with admiration, calling him a hero, a man who had brought unity and strength to Viridian. But amid the praise, Kai remained humble, remembering the journey that had brought him here. One evening, as he sat alone in his small apartment, he thought of his father, wondering if Oren knew of his success. He missed his father deeply, the man who had always believed in him, even when no one else did. Then, a knock at his door startled him. He opened it to find Oren standing there, his face lined with emotion. "Kai." Oren's voice broke, and he reached out, pulling his son into a tight embrace. "I thought I'd lost you forever." Kai hugged him back, his own heart overflowing with emotion. "I'm here, Dad. I made it. I found my way back." As they stood together, Kai felt a sense of wholeness he hadn't known in years. The family was healing, and the pain of the past was finally beginning to fade. Chapter 18, Forgiveness. The reunion with his father marked a turning point for Kai. His brothers, humbled by his kindness, sought his forgiveness once more. Kai knew that true forgiveness would take time, but he was willing to try. In a quiet moment, he gathered his brothers together, speaking from the heart. "I know you've changed," he said, his voice steady, "and I'm willing to forgive, but we have to rebuild this trust. It won't be easy, but if we work together, maybe we can heal." The brothers nodded, each filled with gratitude and respect. They knew they didn't deserve his kindness, but they were determined to make amends. Chapter 19, Reconciliation. As the months passed, the family grew closer, each member working to rebuild the bonds that had been broken. Kai's strength and wisdom became a guiding light for them, and slowly they began to trust one another again. Oren watched with pride, grateful for the family that had once seemed lost. He saw the man Kai had become, and he knew that his son's journey had led him to a place of true purpose. Chapter 20, A Future United. With his family by his side, Kai continued to lead Viridian, bringing hope and unity to a city that now knew his name and his story. His journey had transformed him, shaping him into a leader who understood both strength and compassion. Kai had realized that his dreams had indeed come true, not in the way he had once imagined, but in a way that felt even more meaningful. The love and respect he had earned were not based on titles or power, but on the impact he had made and the lives he had touched. And his family, once divided by jealousy and resentment, now stood with him, each brother humbled and changed by Kai's forgiveness, and leadership. One evening, as they all gathered at the cafe, now thriving and filled with laughter, Ezra raised a toast. To Kai, he said, his voice warm and proud. To the young man who turned his trials into triumphs, who found his purpose and shared it with all of us. Oren's eyes glistened with pride as he looked at his son. You were always destined for greatness, Kai. Not because of the dreams or the jacket, but because of who you are. You've shown us what true strength and resilience mean. Kai smiled, feeling the warmth of his family and friends around him. He knew he would always carry the scars of the past, but now they served as reminders of the path he had traveled and the lessons he had learned. With his family at his side, he was no longer alone. Together, they celebrated, bound not just by blood, but by a shared understanding of forgiveness, growth, and love. Kai had finally found his place in the world, a place where his dreams had led him to a future united, where he could lead with compassion and inspire others to do the same. And as he looked around the table, seeing the joy and unity among his loved ones, he knew that this was the true fulfillment of his dreams, a future of hope, unity, and endless possibilities.
Thank you for tuning into Ultra Sagaverse and joining us on our journey through storytelling. If this story moved you, imagine what the next one could bring. What life lesson, mystery, or hidden truth will we uncover together? Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter or saga. And tell us, what do you think will happen next? What story would you like us to cover in an upcoming episode? Tell us your thoughts below and let's keep the conversation going.